Hi. During budget season, there's a lot of information to absorb. So this year we're going to make a small number of videos to help explain the budget in Portland Public Schools. Today, I want to share information about how funding works in the state of Maine. For Portland Public Schools, there's 4 major revenue streams. The first is local property taxes. That's about 76% of our budget. The second is state funding, which is 15%. The third is federal funds at 5%, and then the remaining is a small number of grants and the use of our fund balance. Property taxes is by far our biggest component. There's 2 factors that go into property taxes. There's your assessed value of your home, and then the mill rate, which is the tax rate per $1,000 of assessed value. Unlike districts in other states, or even our own city, we're limited in our ability to raise other revenues and are really dependent on just property tax. The second funding stream is state funding. In Maine, there's a complex funding formula called the Essential Programs and Services. There's 2 components to that. The first is the state's calculation of the cost to educate the students in the district. This is really driven by student enrollment in the district and student demographics. The other side of that formula is around the state's calculation of the local district's ability to cover the cost. So in Maine, where the state contributes 55% of educational costs, it's for the overall cost of education across the state. But municipalities, depending on their assessed property value, may receive more than 55% or less. In Portland, we receive around 16% of that cost, and we actually contribute 84% towards that. In Portland, we're in a particularly difficult spot when it comes to state funding. We have what I call 3 strikes against us. The first is that we've seen a decline in student enrollment. This is not unique to Portland, but is in fact common across the state and across the country. That decline in enrollment for this coming year has resulted in a $770,000 decrease in state revenue. The second strike is increased property valuation, which indicates that we can afford to carry more of the cost locally. Our property valuation's gone up by about 15% in the state's eyes. That resulted this year in a reduction of $3.1 million. And then the third strike is that we're not a minimum receiver, or as I call it, a minimum contributor. In the state funding formula, all districts are ensured that they receive either 5% of the minimum state allocation adjustment or 50% of their special education adjustment. In those cases, the practical implication is that they contribute less towards that 45% than Portland does, as we're not a minimum receiver. The third area of funding that we receive is federal funds. Those funds are targeted for specific student populations. In IDEA funding, which supports students with IEPs or individualized education programs, we receive between $2 and $3 million. And then in our titles 1, 2, 3, and 4, that funding supports a range of students from economically disadvantaged to multilingual learners to overall student enrichment and experience. And so there, the federal government really targets their funds. And then the fourth funding stream that we have for our budget are small local grants and then the use of the fund balance. The fund balance is like a savings account. It's revenue that we've received in previous years and not spent. Going into next year, we estimate that we'll have between $12 and $13 million. And in this coming budget, we've set aside $3.9 million of our fund balance to help lower the property tax burden on our homeowners. And so in Maine, how does funding work for school districts? There's 4 components: local property taxes, state funding, the federal funds, and then the use of small local grants and our fund balance. Thank you for joining me in this series, and we look forward to walking you through other parts of our budget in other videos.